Welcome to Trust the Badge. Today, Orange County Sheriff John Mina joins us in this episode. Sheriff Mina began his career in law enforcement in 1987 with the United States Army and later joined the Orlando Police Department in 1991. He dedicated 28 years to the department, rising through the ranks to become the 38th police chief of Orlando in 2014. In 2018, he became the sheriff of Orange County. Sheriff Mina is known for a strong commitment to community policing and has implemented numerous programs to foster trust and engagement within the community. Welcome, Sheriff Mina.
Hello, this is Sheriff John Mina. I am the sheriff in Orange County, Florida here. My background, after I graduated high school, I joined the United States Army in 1987. I was part of the 82nd Airborne Division, and I was a military police officer stationed in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So while I was stationed there in Fort Bragg, the Orlando Police Department came there to recruit officers to come here to Florida. And I'd always wanted to be involved in civilian law enforcement. And, so I came down here, was hired by the Orlando Police Department in 1991. And I served 28 years with the Orlando Police Department, doing everything from patrol to narcotics to training. I was a bike cop, community involvement, and so I started taking the test to be promoted. And at each level, I was promoted at sergeant, lieutenant, captain. I really enjoyed it because I thought I could affect more change that way. And so I kept getting promoted, and I had a lot of mentors along the way pushing me to take the next test and to take the next step towards my career. While all that's going on in those 28 years, I went, back to college, got my, bachelor degree in criminal justice administration. And I was lucky enough to work for then Chief Val Demings, who eventually went on to become a member of U.S. Congress. And it was that time when she was chief of police. I worked for her as her lieutenant. I sat in the office right next to her. And I really saw myself in the role of the chief. I thought I could really do this. And so started doing everything I needed to do to prepare myself to become a chief. And then luckily in 2014, Mayor Buddy Dyer from the city of Orlando appointed me to be the 38th police chief in the city of Orlando. So I was chief in Orlando for about 4 years. And it was during that time that then Sheriff Demings, who used to be the sheriff in Orange County, decided he wanted to run for mayor in Orange County. So once he decided to leave, and I thought to myself, well, who else is best equipped to be the sheriff? I already know everyone in this community. I was already the chief of the fifth largest police department in the state of Florida. So I was a resident of Orange County for over 30 years. So I was like, I think I want to be the sheriff, and I think I would do a good job. So ran for sheriff, was elected in 2018 in a special election because Sheriff Demings had left his post early to run for mayor. Then was reelected again in 2020, and I'm up for reelection in 2024.
Thank you, Sheriff, for that story. And for everyone, again, that is Sheriff John Mina from the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Thank you so much for your time. That's a really interesting story. And that also answers my next question, which is what encouraged you to become a law enforcement officer? So was it mainly just the Orlando Police Department's recruiting, or was there a want that you had beforehand?
No, it started long ago beforehand. And I tell people I had two very specific interactions with law enforcement at a young age. The first one, I was probably like 9 or 10, and me and my mom, my brothers, we were involved in a traffic crash. I just remember the officer coming, and his uniform was sharp looking. He had a nice, clean patrol car that I thought was neat that time. And then I remember that he treated us, compassionately and with respect. And so then fast forward several years later, when I was a teenager, I had a very different interaction with law enforcement. I was cutting through some yards, just going to the store, and I was stopped by law enforcement, and that interaction was totally different. I didn't feel like I was treated with dignity and respect. So I always wanted to be in law enforcement. And I said back then at that time, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be like that first guy, not like this second guy. So that's really what led me towards a life of service. And then, of course, I figured, maybe a good route to take was, going into the military first, getting some discipline, getting a little feel for being in law enforcement through the military police.
That's really interesting because recently I interviewed Sheriff Grinnell from Flagler County, and he told me something pretty similar in terms of how he wanted to go to the military first, try that out, and then go into law enforcement. Now, fast forward to your time as sheriff. How has the community's relationship with the sheriff's department changed from your time as a deputy to now as the sheriff?
Well, I would say it's, I tell our deputies, uh, the profession, the career of law enforcement is like a roller coaster. When I first started in 1991, and I was in the academy, and one of the instructors walked in and he had this video of the Rodney King incident in L.A. And I turned to my friend and I thought, man, I think people are going to hate us out there. Um, and and so law enforcement was at a low, and then of course 9/11 happened, and people saw police officers in New York running up those stairs to save people along with their firefighter friends. And then of course, we had so many horrible incidents that were really highlighted nationally, from Michael Brown to George Floyd, and law enforcement hit a low. And then there started to become this movement of abolish the police and defund the police. And then
Right.
what I learned quickly after that is, like, this community here actually loves law enforcement. And I remember during those tough times in law enforcement, around those times, walking down the street and so many people just coming up to me and other deputies saying, "Hey, you guys are doing a good job. Just keep up the the good work. We know you have a very difficult job. So we trust you. We want you here." And that was in all neighborhoods.
How involved have you been with community policing initiatives during your time as the sheriff?
Yeah, very involved. So when I started, I'm doing a lot of different initiatives involving the community, especially our youth. When I was chief in Orlando, and carried that over here, so we have dozens of different programs here at the sheriff's office, from the teen academy to police athletic league. We just recently bought a gaming trailer that we can take out into communities. And so not everyone likes to play basketball or football, and sometimes it's really hot here in Florida, so we take this air conditioned gaming trailer out there that can play all their favorite games on Xbox. And it's been a really big hit. I started doing community barbecues, and so we would just set up in a park or a neighborhood, and we start just cooking hamburgers and hot dogs, and have games out there. And people are like, "Well, what's going on? What are you doing?" We're like, "We're not doing anything. We're just hanging out with you guys." So there's just so many different things we have done in the community, to food giveaways, backpack giveaways, and then I'm able to disperse a lot of money into youth and mentoring programs, because we seize a lot of drug monies from drug dealers, and we put that bad money and make it some good back in the community. So we're able to give, since I've been sheriff, we've given $1 million back into the community for those drug seizure funds. So that's been really good. And so what I tell our deputies all the time is that it's those formal community activities are good, but sometimes it's the most informal interactions that we have with our youth and our community members that have the most meaningful impact. And so, I tell them every day, just try and have a positive interaction with someone from our community, especially our youth.
Just out of curiosity, because it's the first I've heard of the gaming trailer. That's actually pretty cool. Have you seen more community engagement over the past few years?
Absolutely. So I think what law enforcement as a profession has realized, and certainly I've realized this throughout my career, is that it's not all about arresting the bad guy. we're going to arrest the bad guys. We're going to arrest the drug dealers and the bank robbers and the people who commit some very heinous crimes out there. We also have to engage with the community, and especially these days, we have to continue to build trust, and so it's a little bit of both. We have to arrest the bad guy, but we also have to engage with the community because a lot of times they're the ones telling us, well, here's where the bad guy is. That's where they're selling the drugs, and telling us what's happening in their neighborhoods.
And with these same initiatives that you just told us, do you plan to use the same ones in the future to build and maintain positive relationships?
Absolutely. We're going to continue on the ones that we've used. We've also, uh, when I was chief in Orlando, we had a program involving cops and kids called Dueling Dragons, where it's kids are involved in the great sport of dragon boating. And so when I came here as sheriff, I brought that initiative here as well. So we've teamed up with them. So now our deputies are in the boat paddling with these kids, and really forming those bonds. And it's been a huge success. We'll continue to do those and any other activities that are going to help us better engage with the community.
What about the Explorer program?
Yeah, so we have a pretty vibrant Explorer program. As a matter of fact, our Explorers were at the Memorial Day service with me and had their own color guard team. So they go to a lot of different events for us and help us out with those events, whether it's passing out candy at a parade or helping with parking. And it kind of gives them, a sense of duty, gives them discipline and guidance, and also, responsibility as well, that to show up on time and do what you said you were gonna do. And so many of our deputies have been in the Explorer program, and that's where they started, and they learned. It's really there that they learned their love for law enforcement and their love for the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
For anyone listening, what the Explorer program is, it's for teenagers, usually between the ages of 13 to 18. And teenagers from those ages experience what it's like to be a police officer in those shoes. They learn basic police training, 10 codes, signals, everything, or most of the things that you would go through at police academy, just at a young age to get that early experience. So if you are listening and are between those ages, definitely check one out at your local police station. And if you're here in Orange County, clearly there's a strong and growing program here. Sheriff, going back to the interview, what do you believe are the most significant challenges facing law enforcement in our community today, and how do you plan to address them?
One of the most significant challenges facing law enforcement today is, many from our profession are retiring. There are many vacancies in agencies across the United States. And if you go back to, long before probably you were born, in the early 90s, um, then President Bill Clinton introduced the crime bill that added 100,000 law enforcement officers across the United States. So
Wow.
all of those officers have been slowly retiring here over the past 2 or 3 years, and then all the other officers who came on that time as well. So the good news is there's still plenty of people that want to be in law enforcement. So, like, to give you an idea, at our agency last year, we hired about 175 deputies, but we lost about that many through retirement. So we're just trying to keep up with the attrition. And then, of course, as Orange County grows, we continue to grow. So one of the things we're doing is adding positions so that we can keep up with the fast growth that's happening here in Orange County, and make sure that we have enough deputies for everyone. We recruit from all over the southeastern United States, every military installation and college we've been to. We've also gone to Puerto Rico as well to recruit bilingual officers or bilingual deputies from there as well.
From what I've heard, other sheriff's offices usually go to colleges and local schools just to see if students would be interested, but that's really interesting. And outside of retirement, how is recruitment and retainment? Because I know that in some parts of the US, that's really hard as of right now.
Yeah, so luckily we have been very blessed here in Florida. Governor DeSantis has been a strong supporter of law enforcement. he has supplied funding for law enforcement officers who want to move from other parts of the country who may think that they're not supported there. So, it's a $5,000 bonus. Plus, we give our own bonuses as well. So say someone wanted to come from a different state, they can get up to $7,500 if they're certified. And it's been a good recruiting tool. I think a lot of people really like the way Florida supports its law enforcement.
I've always heard about and seen the results of how we are a very strong police state. Because, as you said, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has initiated legislation where if you move in from out of state as a police officer to here, you do get that $5,000 bonus. And even in state officers, I believe, get around $1,000 in bonuses.
Yes.
So that is a huge plus. And if you're listening and you're looking into law enforcement, just know that Florida is the place to be if you want that bonus. In your opinion, what common misconception does the community have about law enforcement that needs to be changed?
So it really depends upon the community you're in. In some of our more challenging communities, there may be a distrust of law enforcement because of past use of force incidents. And then in some of your more affluent areas, I think there are people there that think that all we do is just give out speeding tickets and we don't do enough. So it really depends from area to area and what's going on at the time, related to law enforcement. I do know that many times if there's a national incident, that usually awakens local community activists here, even though
For sure.
it happened, in Minnesota.
Right.
Now, I remember during that, period after George Floyd was killed, that there were many people who wanted to do town halls and Zooms because we were going through COVID about that to talk about, what law enforcement is doing about use of force.
What specific scenarios do you think put law enforcement on the downside when projected by the media, as you just said, for example, the George Floyd incident? Do you think there are any other specific incidents that do the same?
Yeah, any time that the community sees a video or an incident where it looks like they just go too far, where the deputy lost control, and then certainly and tragically and unfortunately, when someone who is unarmed is killed by law enforcement, those incidents seem to me to have the biggest reaction, both locally and nationwide from our community. And then if that person happens to be a person of color or younger, it's even exacerbated,
Right.
and sometimes can really, and rightfully so, get the community riled up about what's going on with their law enforcement agency.
Speaking of how the community does get riled up, as someone who does try to change the perception of law enforcement today, I do believe that one of the most detrimental movements is the defund the police movement. Unfortunately, many police departments in the nation were defunded. What are your thoughts on the defund the police movement and why is it a bad idea?
So a couple things. One, we were very, very lucky here in Orange County that we're supported by a mayor and county commissioners that view public safety as their top priority. So in the year after COVID, despite I remember there was like almost 30 people who came to speak to the mayor and the county commission during our budget hearings. And they wanted to defund the Orange County Sheriff's Office. In fact, our budget increased by $10 million the first year and then $10 million the second year. So while many agencies across the United States did see their budgets cut, our budget only increased because this community, and not just the mayor and the commissioners, the entire community as a whole knows how public safety is so important and such a priority here. And it needs to be funded because we want this to be
Right.
a safe community.
I do believe that it's hard to protect the public if there's not funding in the police departments. I'm glad that there was an opposite effect here. But what do you think about just defund the police in general in other parts of the nation where it did take effect?
So I just think it's a bad move. I think that you've seen in some of these areas where they did defund the police, they realized it was a mistake and they're going backwards. You can't because you can't cut training budgets, you can't cut equipment, you can't cut personnel. That's just going to lead to people not getting the service they want. That's going to lead to longer response times. That could lead to more injury and more death because there weren't enough law enforcement to respond to that. Unfortunately, it's a very small percentage, but there is a small percentage of people who like to commit crimes and sometimes violent crimes in all areas of the country. So we have to make sure that we have enough law enforcement to handle that. And so any defund the police movement is just not a good idea at all.
I like that you made the point because, for example, in Burlington, Vermont, there's a small police department where they defunded police immediately. And now, as you see, they have a huge backlash. And the main reason why is because of retainment. So their original plan was to just cut the police department just by a little bit. But because of the discouragement from their community and the disrespect they had, more officers left than expected. Now their police department's cut almost by half. And now
Mhm.
you see crime rates rising or skyrocketing the year after. The city is trying to fix that problem and rehire those police officers. I'm glad that we live in a state where we don't have to worry about that. What message do you have for any current or future law enforcement listening to this interview, and how can they change the perspective of law enforcement in the future?
I think it goes back to, like I said earlier, really taking time to engage with our community, really taking time to build trust, and not just wave to people. Actually, get out of your patrol car, walk around, talk to people. Because many times, again, in some of our more challenging areas, when they see law enforcement, it's because something bad happened, right? Someone was shot or stabbed, someone went to jail, someone's getting a ticket. So it's important for the community to see us when nothing bad is happening. And that's when those one-on-one conversations can take place. And, I think that's something that, it doesn't take any time or any money uh, or training. It just takes a little time and effort to do. So, getting out of your patrol cars, talking with as many people as you can, continuing to build the trust and foster those good relationships with our community, especially our youth, is so very important and can really um, help change the perspective of law enforcement in the future. And I think we've seen that. And so I think when body cameras came out, I think a lot of some law enforcement were a little hesitant about it. But now we're able to show all those good stories on our social media outlets because we captured it on body worn camera. And we've done that a lot. We're continuing to tell our own story, and we're showing people that wait a minute, it's not, they don't always just arrest people. They're trying to help people. They're engaging with their youth. So that's been a huge boost for law enforcement over the past, I'd say, 5 to 10 years.
And what would you tell those who are listening to this podcast that are around my age and on the fence about joining law enforcement or not?
A few things. One, the same thing I told my own sons who are not in law enforcement, who were thinking about it, is you got to want it. You have to want it. You can't go in halfway. You have to go in. You have to go all in, and you have to commit yourself to a life of service. You have to put others first, and it is a dangerous profession, so we can't ever forget that. But agencies like the Orange County Sheriff's Office, we provide some of the best training. We have the best equipment. We have all the resources and things in place to help keep people safe who want to become involved in law enforcement. And we're always looking to improve and get better equipment, better training for our deputies to make sure they have the best tools to help protect this community. And just to seek out law enforcement officers, ask them their opinion, ask them about the agency they work for. And I think that's the best way to go about it, is get advice and to see if it's really for you. Do programs like you mentioned before, the explorers to see, and you'll get a little taste of it to see if it's something that you would like to be involved in.
That's really great advice. I'm sure everyone who listened really appreciated that. Ultimately, in your opinion, how do we as a community trust the badge?
So trust needs to be earned. It's just not given out by the community. We have to earn that trust. And
Right.
so all those things that we do in the community, keeping the community safe, patrolling those neighborhoods in the middle of the night when everyone else is sleeping, at risk to their own lives, helps build trust. doing those community barbecues, engaging with the community, having those one-on-one conversations with our residents, especially our youth, continues to build trust. So, I think I always say, even when something bad happens in our community involving our agency, and I've seen it, the community, they don't like it, but they understand it. They're like, wait a minute, that's one person, there's one bad apple did this. The majority of those deputies are good people. We see what they do every single day. And so ultimately they do trust us. And, we just have to continue to build that trust and continue to foster those relationships, let the community know that, we're here for them. I tell everyone, it's like, it's not my sheriff's office. It's the community sheriff's office. I'm just lucky enough to be the elected sheriff and be entrusted with running this very good and very big agency. So yeah, just continue to think. We law enforcement has to continue to earn that trust, and the community will ultimately give you that trust if you've earned it.
Absolutely. And you make a really good point of how, luckily and fortunately enough, our community sees that if one deputy makes a mistake or if it's just one minor incident, then it's seen as not the majority would do the same. That notion should be a bit more popular across the country, especially because, as we've seen, to just bring up George Floyd again, that one police officer, yes, was completely in the wrong. But that doesn't mean that every single other police officer in the nation would do the same thing to the point where we have to defund the police. That's a really good notion that I think most people should have. Before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts for our audience, or would you just like to leave any messages or have a final thought?
Yeah, I guess my final thoughts would be that the profession of law enforcement is a noble profession. Uh, like I said earlier, we have men and women who risk their lives for complete strangers while we're all sleeping. They're patrolling our neighborhoods, keeping us safe. And so there are people here I know in the sheriff's office and throughout law enforcement throughout the country. They could be doing 100 other things. They could be working with computers. They could be singers. They could be dancers. We have so many talented people here, but they have chosen this life of service. They want to help keep this community safe, and they do a great job at it. And they should be commended for it, and our law enforcement should be held in the highest regard because they have a very, very difficult profession. It's a profession that is under a white hot spotlight, and it needs to be, because we do make mistakes. And the thing about it is, even when we make mistakes about it, as long as we're upfront about it, we're transparent about it, and we hold our people accountable, that's what the community wants.
Well, thank you for your time, Sheriff. And again, for everyone listening, that is Sheriff John Mina from Orange County Sheriff's Office. He is a very supportive sheriff. And as you know, he has done a lot with this community over his time as the sheriff. And I believe, are you running for re-election?
I'm running for re-election in
And
24.
well, there you go. If you are in Orange County, just keep that in mind. Sheriff John Mina is running for re-election. And as we've seen, he's done so much for his community. We know about all of his community efforts, such as the Explorer program, the game trailer, and all sorts of other events, such as barbecuing, that he's done and his work so much to the point where there's so much trust within this community. Thank you for listening to this episode of Trust the Badge. Please follow at Trust the Badge on Instagram for updates, and follow Trust the Badge on any podcast platform such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube.